What is going on, y'all, man? We are back with more episodes of the Youth Podcast coming this summer. We're so excited. And I got my beautiful wife here. Say hi to everyone.
Hi, everyone.
She's still pregnant, if you're wondering. So this is actually coming out tomorrow, so it won't really matter. You'll be pregnant. But we are so excited to be back with more episodes over the summer. And so kind of what we're going to do is we're going to talk about just the theme of the month. So just for everybody that's watching, maybe that doesn't know, the theme of this month for our youth is choices. Choices.
Wow.
So fancy, so spiritual. And we've been talking about choices since the beginning of May, and it's been really cool. And obviously, choices dictate everything that we do, right? Choices dictate our life. Choices dictate our everyday moments. Choices dictate whether we are going to do this podcast or not. We made the choice to do it. We're here, right? We all make thousands of choices every single day. And so we're going to talk about this idea that we've kind of been talking about in Riverside Youth, but choices dictate your future. That is what kind of the theme of this podcast is going to be. And I'm excited because I brought my beautiful wife in to give us such amazing wisdom, such amazing guidance, such amazing voice of this nation. I'm just kidding. Voice of this church. They love you. Everybody talked about the last podcast that we were on. They asked if we could do it again. So that's why you're here, and that's why we're kicking off the summer together. I'm not saying that. I promise. I promise people love you. So we're going to talk for just 25 minutes, just about this idea. And so I don't know what the first thing that comes to your head, choices dictate your future. Was there a moment where, I don't know, let's talk about our life. Did we do stupid things where our choices dictated our future? I don't know. Is there anything that comes to your head that you're like, oh my gosh, yeah, I'm stupid? Or, oh my gosh, that was great. Good choices, bad choices, all of it. Yeah. Like, what's your thoughts on that?
Oh, man. I remember just being in high school and just feeling like that pressure of having to make decisions and choices and making the right ones. Like, everyone's always like, make good choices. My parents would say that every single morning to me, make good choices. And I took that pressure on myself a lot. And obviously I made bad choices. Right. And I made good choices. It's your life. Like you said, it's just a bunch of decisions and choices that you make. But I guess I did put a lot of pressure on myself. And sometimes that was hard for me. You almost crumble under that pressure of choosing the right thing, choosing the right thing to do all the time. And so I think especially for those junior high and high school students, obviously all of you guys, you have to remember, yes, choices dictate your future, but also don't put so much pressure on yourself, because I think that can be bad too. You know what I mean? Yeah. Just
putting a lot of pressure on yourself.
Yeah, because I think sometimes you crumble under that. Yeah. Like I did. I know I did. Just where am I supposed to go to college? What am I supposed to? I mean, they made us take in junior high like career tests.
Really?
Yeah. Like, what are you going to do with the rest of your life?
That's
at
wild.
13 years old, you need to know.
That's wild. I didn't know until like end of my senior year what I was going to do with my life.
No, actually, and
it's not even. I had graduated. And
there's people who are our age now that don't know what they want to do with the rest of their life, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
I think it's good to have a plan, but also, man, like,
take the pressure off.
Yeah, like a lot of people, I think, end up backing out of that decision because a lot can change in 10 years. You know, you may want to be a nurse right now at 15, but stuff can change in a year, in 2 years, in 3 years. Like, maybe you end up being called to ministry or being called to do missions, or you want to be a teacher. And like, you just have to be open to that as well. Like, there's not always a ton riding on your decisions. Sometimes there are.
And sometimes they change.
Exactly.
Like, sometimes you could be called to something one season, but then you're called to something and something else. Exactly. And I think obviously choices on that is so huge, and making life choices, and maybe there's some juniors and seniors watching that are like, or listening, that are having to make those choices. But let's like rewind to maybe when you said when you're in junior high. Let's rewind to when we were in junior high, because obviously in junior high nobody cares about, like, you're not thinking about what you're going to do after college or high school, right?
Yeah, unless you're like really prepared.
Unless you're really prepared, and then good for you. But I would say for most people, most guys I would speak for, are like never prepared in junior high.
Yeah.
But I'm thinking of like everyday choices dictate our future. And that sounds like, oh, this little choice today is going to dictate my future. There's no way, because my life is going to change over the next 5 years. So how could this little choice dictate my future? But I think there's times where we can get caught up in addictions. There's times where we can get caught up in the wrong friend group. And there's times where we can get caught up in all these little choices, not necessarily big choices that are dictating our career and our future, but the little choices. Yeah. And I know for me, I made a lot of little choices when I was in junior high, when I was even beginning of high school, that slowly started to change who I was, right? You start making choices to lash out at your parents. You make choices to cuss at your siblings. You make choices to hang out with a friend group that does things that they shouldn't do. And I think let's talk about those little choices, right? Because I think sometimes we think about the big choices and we skip the little choices. But those little things dictate your future, right? Yeah. I just talked about Sunday, and I'm probably going to mention this in the other podcast that we're going to talk about, but I talked about on Sunday about your friends. And the friends that I had in high school for that season was a bad choice that I made because it dictated my next 4 years, you know? And so I don't know. Let's talk about those little choices. What do you think about little choices?
Well, they're little,
they are little.
Can be big.
Can be big.
I think, like you said, like a lot of little ones can add up.
Yes.
It can change who you are.
Right.
I know in junior high I got caught up with just like not a good crowd of people.
Same.
And my parents raised me right. They always told me you are who you hang out with. And I just would like shake it off. And it's true though. Yeah. Like you are who you hang out with. Yeah. And I know we talk about this like a lot in youth and stuff, but I get hanging out with people because you're like, I can be a positive influence on them, but a lot of the times they end up dragging you down. So you have to be very smart about who you hang out with. And so the crowd I got around, they just kind of like bullied people.
Right.
And we're just like always talking crap about them and like literally making fun of people.
Right.
And I was raised better than that. Like truly, that's just like not how my parents raised me. But I got caught up in that. Right. And I could tell myself over and over, well, they're fun and I'm not going to start doing that. But I did. And my parents and other friends and leaders even at youth would notice like, oh, why is Miranda doing that? Like, that's not her. And they called that out in me actually. And I had to have a difficult conversation with those friends and be like, hey, like I can't be friends with you anymore. I had to make the choice to then walk away
Distance
from
yourself.
That, which is really hard and awkward. It is really weird.
It's
like when you're at school and you have to see them and you're like, oh, now there's drama because I told them I can't hang out with them anymore. But I had to make the decision and that choice to say, you know what, this isn't who I am. I need to change my behavior, change my crowd, who I'm with, and move on.
What'd you feel on the after you did that?
Honestly, I was like, I feel like I can be me again.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Like you weren't faking it.
Yeah. And I think junior high and high school is the worst time to let that happen because it's a whole identity thing. Yeah. I mean, honestly, junior high and high school, you just don't even know who you are.
You're trying to figure it out.
Truly.
But that's where those choices dictate your future because you're trying to figure out who you are, but you're making choices to try to fit in to be somebody that you're not.
Exactly.
And that's why I think that's the point that I'm trying to get across with choices dictate your future. Yes, we can talk about college. Yes, we can talk about that idea because it's true. But ultimately, when you're trying to figure out who you are in high school, junior high, you're going to make choices that you think are right, but ultimately maybe they're not right. And I don't know, it's hard to decide. And maybe that's something we can talk about in a minute is like, how do we know what's the right choice? I've had students ask me that. How do you know what's the right choice? How do you know if it's God telling you to do something? How do you know if it's not God? And I think that's the thing that I really want to get across is those little choices every single day. You think, man, you're just making fun of a kid, but ultimately that slowly then becomes your MO. That becomes who you are. And now you've become this bully in school because you started out making fun of somebody, but then it just got worse and worse. And you do it because of your friends. You do it because you want to be liked. You want to do it because you want to be cool and all those things. Well,
and soon enough, that's just who you are. You become that, honestly. Yeah. Like, if you think about it, if you wake up every single day and you're like, I'm going to make the conscious choice, the decision to be a good person, to encourage people, to just give out an extra compliment, like whatever it is, if you're making that decision every single day to be positive and you're going to slip up, obviously, but you're still saying, no, I'm choosing to do this. Yes. But if you're just like, whatever, I don't need to do that. I can, it just becomes who you are.
Right.
You know, there's so many people in my life who I know that I can tell that from a young age they were making that, or maybe they were making bad choices and then decided to be like, pause, I need to reevaluate.
Right.
But there's so many people in my life who I think of that are just so encouraging. Like my friend Taylor, she's always, you know, you guys all know Tay too. I'm sure she's around a lot. She's just fun. Yeah. You know, she makes that choice every day to be like, you know what, I'm not going to take things too seriously. I'm going to be encouraging and fun and be a good friend. But that's a choice you have to make.
Yeah.
So, and I know there's people out there that aren't making that decision.
Right.
And there's some days where I'm like, I'm choosing to be negative and I'm choosing to, and it can really drain you, and it can go on for as long as you let it.
Right.
Too. Like a whole season where I've looked back on my life and been like, oh my gosh, who was I?
Right.
Like I was really being judgmental and gross and negative all the time, but I wasn't choosing to have a good attitude and to change my mindset. Yeah. So a lot of that, it just becomes who you are. Your decisions make up you eventually. Yeah. And so, yeah, you have to be very careful about the decisions you make.
And I think let's talk about how we make those choices, because I think I've had students ask me, well, how do I know? How do I know what to do? How do I know if it's the right choice? And how do we, I don't know, maybe for you and your daily choices, how do you lean into Jesus? Because that's why we're here. That's what we're talking about. We want to apply him to this, because I know for me, when I would make choices, or when I have to make and you don't pray about the little choices. I'm just gonna be straight up honest. Like I don't wake up every day or in every moment like, am I gonna do the podcast today? Well, it's on my list of things to do, so obviously I'm making the choice to do it, but I'm not gonna pray about it. You know what I mean? And that sounds so stupid, but just little things like if we have to go to the grocery store, should I pray about going to the grocery store?
What kind of cheese am I buying?
Right. What kind of cheese?
It's not that serious.
It's not that serious, and those little kind of choices. Yeah. But I think when it comes to maybe choices you have been making, like, hey, is this the right friend group I need to have? Is this the right attitude I should be having? Lord, help me to change my attitude. And I know for me, we prayed, there's a few choices that I remember, or decisions that had to be made, choices that had to be made, that I remember asking God for. And one was you, and one was a financial thing that we were walking through. And it was so cool I remember praying about those two situations, and God ended up speaking to that and showing me what direction to go in. And so, I don't know, let's lean into that a little bit. What about, like, has there been any moment in your life you're like, oh, dang, I need to ask, like, how do I know what to do in this situation, you know?
Yeah. I mean, obviously there's us, and I think we've shared that story. But I've just always leaned into just my heart, like my peace, you know, and that comes from Jesus. It's the Holy Spirit who guides us in decision making if we let him. And there was a time I remember where I had this job as I was actually children's assistant before I was the children's pastor, and I worked under Pastor Dana. And she came to me, I was 19 years old. I was young, you know, only a year older than some of you. And she was like, hey, they asked me if I would be the executive pastor. And they brought your name up for children's pastor if you're interested. And I was like, what in the world?
You're right.
Yeah, like I just felt so unqualified for that. But also on the back end of that, I remember I had just finished up at ICC, so I had to move on I was about to finish up. I had to move on and decide, okay, am I going to college? And it was on me to pay for that. Right. So it was going to be a financial decision, as well as just if I were to go off to college, it would be kind of a full-time thing. Right. I wouldn't be able to keep the job as children's assistant. Right. And I remember just telling Dana, this was before she had come to me about even becoming the children's pastor. I was just like, I just don't feel peace about that. Like, and she said, listen to that. Like, listen to that. And it was a couple months later that she came to me and said, hey, do you want to be the children's pastor? And so the fact that I didn't pursue that because I knew that wasn't the right choice to make, I think we just have to lean into that. Right. And I know it's easy for us to say, oh, well, like, I just knew. And I think I hated when people would say that, you know, because we're trying to talk about, well, how do you know? Right. You know what I mean? But I think you have to just lean into Jesus. Also finding people that you trust. I trust Pastor Dana to speak into my life about things like that. Right. And so I trusted that she would give me guidance.
Right.
And ultimately it's left up to me, which I don't know if anyone else is indecisive like me. I hate making choices.
Right.
If it's small, or I can't even choose where to go to lunch half the time or what shoes to wear.
Right.
Like I don't like making choices. But finding people that you trust.
Yep.
So find a leader that you can trust to help make those choices. But also, ultimately, it comes down to you. Because I'm someone, I'll ask 15 people before I make a decision. Right. When it's like, why didn't I just turn to God first? Because a lot of the times we can get confirmation from him through prayer, through reading our Bible. Maybe there's been times where, if we're talking about the same like financial thing we were talking about, we were sitting in church, and that Sunday, Josh had prayed about it, and he's like, I want to do this like grand financial thing, like pay off all of this. And I was like, I don't know about that. And we were sitting in church, and Pastor Michael preached a message that was literally speaking directly to me, basically about our financial situation. And I looked at Josh and I was like, do it. You know, like there's been times where it's like, if your heart starts racing, like that's the Holy Spirit. You know what I mean? That's either conviction about a choice that you're making that maybe is wrong, or it's confirmation, like do it, go for it.
Right.
And so, you know, you'll feel, we always say this about choices and decisions. Like if it's the right one, God's going to open up the doors for you.
Yep.
And actually, Savian just talked about this at his team chapel. He was saying it'll stretch you if you're making the right choice. It's not going to feel like
comfortable.
Yeah. It's not supposed to feel super comfortable all the time, and it may stretch you, but you'll know the whole time, oh, this is for my good. Like this is the right thing. You'll have that peace through it all, where it's like, ooh, this might be a little scary. It's stretching me a little, causing me to rely on you, God.
Right.
Because if we're trying to do it on our own, it's the bad decision.
Right.
If we can do it on our own. Right.
Yeah.
We should have to rely on God.
Oh, 100%.
When we're making these decisions that are of him.
Right.
Again, we're talking about bigger decisions now. This is again not like
little tiny.
What shirt am I supposed to wear today?
Yes.
Like it's not. But yeah, God will stretch you. He'll cause you to have to rely on him and his strength, not on your own.
Right.
So.
And I think kind of going off what Savian talked about, but two things is we're called to be uncomfortable, not comfortable. Yeah. Because I think when we get comfortable, that's when we then slip and we fall and we make mistakes. And I think it's not the stretching, right? And I think looking for the right answers and looking for the choices, and you talk about reaching out to leaders, and you said you to ask 15 people before you know. And I think sometimes we get in I want to talk about this for the few minutes that we have left, is the idea of not trying to manipulate it to be what you want it to be. Because I think sometimes we'll go to one leader and we'll ask them, and they will speak, God will speak through them to you. You'll be uncomfortable with what they said, and you're like, I'm not doing, you said I had to ban all my friends on social media. I'm not doing that because that's uncomfortable. But that's exactly what you need to do. But then you'll go to another leader and ask them, and they'll say the same. But then you just keep jumping from leader to leader to youth pastor to friend until you find the answer that you want. And I think,
or you say, I'm not going to do it anyways.
Right.
Then don't come waste our time.
Right.
Don't waste our time.
I mean, that's just a blunt way to put it. I mean, seriously, like if you're looking for advice and we give you advice, take the advice.
100%.
Because most of the time, and I'm not saying, oh, we hear from Jesus, we're like holy, but most of the time we know more. We've experienced more. Yeah. We've lived through it. We're not in college. We're 8 years, whatever, 7 years removed from, not college, from high school. We're removed from it. We're moved from junior high. We've been there, done it, played the game. We've experienced it, and we know more. And so we're giving you the advice that we've learned, or maybe we're giving you advice that God has already spoken to us to give to you. And so,
or what we wish we would have done,
or what we wish we would have done.
Yeah.
I know for me, I always try to give people the advice that I wish I would have had, and I say that all the time when I'm speaking. I'm like, I wish somebody would have told me this. I wish I would have had a youth pastor that I really listened to and went to that told me this. And so we're giving you all of this so you can lean into it. So don't manipulate, because I think I've never done this in my life. I don't think I've ever tried to manipulate something to be what I want it to be. Maybe without me knowing I have. I don't know, but. I just think a lot of times we do this because we want to do it our way, but ultimately you manipulating it then is not you being stretched.
Yeah.
You're not going to then be really used by God. You're not going to really allow God to use you because you're manipulating it to be what you want it to be, which is at that point just make the choice that you want. Yeah. And stop trying to make it look like you're looking for advice.
Or saying, we talk about this a lot, saying like, well, God, God told me I should be doing this.
Right.
Like, I think a lot of the times on the decisions that we make, we bring God's name into it
when really he didn't say. When really he didn't tell you anything.
And that's the thing. We'll know.
And that's manipulating it too, because if God told you to do something, then we'll notice the change. We'll notice the breakthrough. We'll notice whatever it is.
Yeah, exactly.
And we'll notice that it will happen.
Yeah.
But here's what I'll say. God's not going to tell you to do something that's going to eventually fail.
Yeah, yes.
Like, he didn't ask me to be youth pastor and then 2 years down the road it failed. And unless he calls you to something different, that's different. But ultimately, I'm not going to quit and go work at Hy-Vee again. Like, that's not what God, like, God told me to quit Hy-Vee and he told me to wait, and I waited. And 4 months later, or whatever, 3 months later, I ended up getting this job as a youth pastor, junior high leader first. But he didn't ask me to do that, and then eventually me go work back at Hy-Vee.
Right.
Like, God's going to do something through. If it's his plan, his purpose, his choice, his decision, then he's got something great on the other side for it.
Mm-hmm.
And
it'll work out.
Yeah,
for your good and for his glory. Like, it's not gonna fail.
Right.
Yeah.
It's not going to fail. It's not going to fall through the cracks. You're not going to go to this college that you think God told you to go to, and then, actually, college isn't for me. Well, God didn't want you to just waste $10,000, $20,000 on college if that's not what he had for you.
Yeah.
Right? Like, you didn't go to college and then get called back here to come to be the children's pastor and then waste 10, 15 grand on college that you never used.
I knew it was all in the right timing.
Right.
Yeah.
And God, it might take some time, and that's where I wanted to talk about another thing too, is waiting. Mm-hmm. Being patient. Mm-hmm. And waiting. I think the Bible talks so much about waiting. I feel like every other verse that I read, it says, wait on God. Mm-hmm. Just wait. Be patient and wait. Wait for the Lord to move. And we get so eager to do what we want to do when we want to do it and how we want to do it. And you said you were praying about going to college. You didn't feel at peace about it. And then you said like 3 months later, 2 months later, a month later, or whatever, Dana came to you.
I didn't have to apply to other colleges.
Like, you had to wait. Like, you waited, like, and then those months, you're like, I don't know what I'm going to do. Yeah. Like, I don't know what's going to happen. Yeah. And I know for me, when I finished my ACE Teams internship program thing, I didn't get a job right away to a church. Mm-hmm. Everybody said you'll get a job pretty much right out of ACE Teams. You'll be in ministry, right? That didn't happen.
But also, I love this story of Josh waiting, because God did so much in his waiting. He wasn't ready straight out of ACE Teams. No, I wasn't. If you knew Josh back in the day, we have stories. But
I was not ready.
He wasn't ready. He had to wait, because if he would have rushed into it, and we talk about this with our relationship all the time too. Man, I would have dated him 5-6 years ago. Right. I loved him. Like, I was all in. Okay. Not really, but I was crushing on you, but we waited because he did not have confirmation from God that it was time, and I did not have confirmation either. And there would be times where I was like, he's crushing on me, but God had to work on us in that time. And if we would have taken matters into our own hands, it would have been a disaster. And same with if you would have went out seeking, well, Riverside didn't offer me a job, so I'm going to go to this church that I trained with at ACE Teams, or this church. You wouldn't have been here when we needed you here.
Right, exactly.
So he had to wait. And it probably stung to wait, didn't it?
Yeah, a little bit.
To see someone else get the job you wanted here. But he waited, and look at him now.
Right. We're here.
So, yeah.
We've made it.
Yeah.
But it was through the waiting that got us here. You know, you waited. You didn't go to college right away. You waited for a few months, and eventually you didn't know the job was coming. It got offered. I didn't know it was coming. Yeah. But eventually it got offered, and so we both started working here. And I never expected to be the student pastor. I would have been the junior high leader for years if that's what it would have meant. But ultimately things changed. Michael went up, and I stepped in, and Dana stepped up, and you stepped up, but we waited. And I think we're talking, those are really big decisions, but I think on anything, wait. Like, if you're looking for new friends, you're like, man, this friend group's not what I want it to be, so I need new friends. Wait for God to give you those new friends, because I think so often you'll just jump and try to make it happen on your own, and you'll find, again, the wrong friends. Like, you'll find another group of friends that are not what God has for you. And whatever decision it is that is big enough, obviously you're not going to wait for God to tell you what kind of cheese to get. It's not going to happen. It might. I don't know. But most likely you're going to make the choice and just get whatever cheese you want. But on those bigger choices, on the bigger things through high school and junior high and whatever it is, really just wait and be patient, because you don't want to manipulate it to make it your own.
For sure.
Because that is the worst thing that you could do ever. And so.
For sure.
But anyway, I'm going to give it up for my babe, my queen. She's here. She did it again. I just like to call her all the names, the good names.
Okay.
But anyway, I love her. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for being here, and we'll be back next time.